Salt clung to Elias Marlowe's skin like old guilt. The sweat on his neck stung with every breath, and his hands, once steady as any harpoon, now trembled with shame. He stood barefoot on the broken dock of Saint-Michel, staring into the fog as if it might offer mercy. It didn't. Behind him, the coughs of his feverish daughter echoed like cannon fire in his chest. 10 years old, Isadora had her mother's eyes he couldn't meet anymore. Not after what he was about to do. The promise still rang in his ears, never let the world touch our girl. He'd said it to his wife as she bled out on a French corsair's deck. And now, to keep that promise, he had to break it. Because in the shadows of the port, beneath the smell of dead fish and wet rope, someone had offered him a deal soaked in gold and betrayal. The name whispered from behind the veil of fog was one Elias had hoped never to hear again. Blackbeard. Some say he's long gone, others say he never left. And if what they offered was real, if the cursed coin truly belonged to that ship, then what waits in these pirate stories is no treasure at all, but a debt no man survives. The gold was cursed, yes, but it was my name they screamed in the dark. Would you betray the living to keep a promise to the dead? Welcome to the channel The Pirate's Diary. If tales of pirates, lost oaths, and cursed gold stir something in you, the sea keeps its stories, but only for those who dare to remember. Will you join the crew? Subscribe and step aboard. The ink bled as the quill scratched across the parchment. Elias Marlowe's hand trembled, smearing the letters that would seal his soul. Sweat dripped from his brow, mixing with salt and fear. The harbor was quiet, too quiet. Even the gulls had flown. Only the groan of thick ropes and the soft splash of dark water against the stone pier reminded him he hadn't already drowned. Across from him stood a man dressed in gold. Sir Reginald Ashcroft didn't blink. His coat was carved from scarlet velvet, his medals polished until they blinded. His boots made no sound, yet his presence was deafening. He wasn't a man, he was a verdict. Ashcroft had arrived aboard the HMS Lion's Wrath, a floating fortress that moaned when it moved. Its sails were blood-red, its cannons silent but watching. The ship cast a long shadow over Saint-Michel, enough to block the sun from the island's dirt-streaked roofs. Every captain in the Caribbean knew it. Most had learned to turn their eyes. But Elias couldn't look away. Not now. Not with her life on the line. Isadora stood a few paces behind, clutching the limp rag doll her mother had sewn during the last spring before the sickness. Her hair was tangled, her eyes wide. She was only 10, too young to know what a soul costs, old enough to sense it was being sold. Ashcroft's lips curled. 200 gold pieces delivered today. You'll have 6 moons to repay. After that, the crown will take what's owed, of equal or greater value, at my discretion. Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. He didn't read Latin, could barely read English. But he saw the claws at the bottom, curling like a serpent across the back of the parchment. It shimmered in the dim lantern light, a warning meant for those who could not understand it. Possessionem pretia animae. The price of a soul is what it possesses. He signed, not because he trusted, not because he believed, but because the fever in Isadora's lungs was winning. And this was the last card left in his hand. I signed my name, he would whisper years later, but it was her name the sea came to collect. The gold came in a wooden chest, damp and reeking of the hold. Ashcroft's men dropped it at his feet without a word. Elias opened the lid. The coins shimmered like lies. He had never seen so much wealth, and he had never felt so poor. He bought the medicine. He paid the debtors who had circled like sharks. He fed Isadora warm bread and stew for the first time, in weeks. For a moment he believed he had won. For a moment he believed the worst had passed. But the ocean never forgets a deal struck in desperation, especially not one made in the shadow of the lion's wrath. The first moon passed with windless nights and quiet tides. The second brought storms that tore up his nets. The third left the island dry, cracked and still. The fourth brought whispers. A child gone missing in the next village. A widow taken aboard the Lion's Wrath, never to be seen. Again, and always the same story. They had owed something, something small, something forgotten, something that, according to Ashcroft, now belonged to the crown. Elias tried to sleep, but every night he heard the creak of a ship that wasn't anchored. He smelled smoke without fire. He saw a black feather on the windowsill, even when the shutters were closed. One night he woke with a scream in his throat and a whisper in his ear. "The sea does not take what is yours, only what you promised." Remembered the voice. He had heard it once, years ago, drifting from a black-flagged ship lost in fog. Blackbeard. They said he was dead. They said his bones fed crabs. But the sea never buried him. On the sixth moon, the sun rose red. Ashcroft returned, dressed finer than ever, flanked by soldiers who smiled too easily. His boots hit the earth like war drums. He carried no papers this time, just a name. Isadora Marlowe. Elias stepped in front of her. "No, you said equal value." Ashcroft nodded. "Yes, and she is far more valuable than your rotting boat or your bleeding pride. Take me." "I've no use for broken men," he said, brushing a speck of dust from his glove. "But a girl, raised in the right hands, she could be polished." Elias reached for the harpoon beside the door. His hand froze mid-air. A wind rose from the harbor, cold, sharp, unnatural. It smelled of gunpowder and old rum. Ashcroft turned. In the mist, a silhouette approached on the tide, a black ship with torn sails and fire behind its eyes. No flag, no mercy, just the outline of a man with a coat that dragged behind him like smoke. Blackbeard. They said he was a ghost. They said he was the sea's last secret. But here he was, stepping onto the sand, boots leaving no prints, his face hidden beneath the shadow of his hat, beard braided with bones and salt. He looked at Ashcroft like a man weighing chains. "You've claimed what isn't yours," he said. His voice was thunder-sealed in ice. Ashcroft's soldiers raised their rifles, but their hands shook. Blackbeard didn't blink. "Return the girl, or I'll take the wrath as payment." Ashcroft hesitated. Just long enough. Elias grabbed Isadora and ran. Shots rang out, screams followed. But behind them the wind carried only one sound: laughter, cold, cruel, and ancient. Blackbeard's. They reached the cliffs by nightfall. Elias held his daughter close. Her breath was steady now, her fever gone. But he knew the price hadn't vanished, only delayed. He looked back once. The Lion's Wrath was gone. So was Blackbeard's ship. Only a single black feather remained on the shore. "The deal was never with Ashcroft," he muttered. "It was with the sea. And the sea always comes to collect." The wind hadn't whispered in 6 months. Nets floated empty. The sea, once a friend, had turned into a mirror of silence and death. No gulls, no fish, no mercy. Isadora turned 11 beneath the fever, her breath shallow, her skin always cold. Elias gave her a dried flower pressed between the pages of an old book, the last thing her mother had ever touched. She smiled weakly. He didn't. The 6th night arrived like a wound torn open. The moon rose, wide and colorless, casting a pale sheet of light over the bay. It was then that he returned. Ashcroft, not with soldiers, not with drums or flags, but with men dressed in dark blue coats that drank the light. They moved without sound. Their boots didn't echo. Their swords hung low and gleamed like teeth. Their eyes were hollow, hollow like debt, hollow like the grave. Elias stepped out of his cabin with his old hat in hand and his soul unraveling with every step. He knew why they had come. The tide carried no surprises anymore, only consequences. Ashcroft stood still, hands behind his back, the smell of smoke clinging to him. "Where are my 200 coins, whaler?" he asked, voice dry like driftwood left too long in the sun. Elias's mouth tasted of rust. "I don't have them, but I can work. I can haul nets for the Navy, cut trees, serve on a galleon, anything. Ashcroft raised a single finger. "I'm not interested in your hands," he said. Then he turned his head, slowly, deliberately, toward the door behind Elias, to the girl, watching from the shadows. Isadora. She stood barefoot on the threshold, one hand gripping the old book, the other clinging to the wooden frame. Her face was white with illness, but her eyes still held the stubborn fire of her mother. Her hair was braided, just as her mother used to do before the sickness. Ashcroft smiled. "I'm interested in your valuable possessions," he said. Then he pointed. "The girl comes with me, tonight." The world stopped. The night itself held its breath. Elias didn't move. His fingers twitched around the brim of his hat. A scream tried to rise in his throat, but drowned somewhere deep. Isadora didn't speak. She just looked at him, waiting, trusting. Elias's voice finally cracked free. "She's not for sale." Ashcroft stepped closer, boots crushing the brittle ground. "You made the bargain, Marlowe. You signed the name. You accepted the gold. And now the sea collects." Elias could feel the black feather still hidden beneath the floorboards. He'd buried it, thinking it would silence the curse. But curses don't rot, they wait. Like the ocean, like ghosts. The men in blue unsheathed their blades. Ashcroft didn't blink. "The girl comes with me. Tonight." That line would echo for the rest of Elias's life. And long after, in the tides, in the caves, in the whispers of other fathers who made the same mistake, in the broken prayers of men who thought they could cheat the salt and shadows. Some say Blackbeard appeared that night, that his ship drifted from the fog, cannons silent, lanterns lit by no flame. Some say he watched from the cliff, arms crossed, judging who would sink and who would be swallowed. But the truth is this: Elias had nothing left to trade, except what he loved most, and the sea always wants what it was never given. The rain came down like knives, cold, sharp, relentless. It soaked through Elias's shirt, turned the dirt to mud, and made the world feel as heavy as the shame in his chest. He fell to his knees. His palms sank into the earth. His voice cracked. "Take my house, my boat, my bones if you must, but not her, not my daughter." His hands clutched the boots of Sir Reginald Ashcroft, now streaked with mud and tears. He pressed his forehead to the leather and begged like a man who had already buried everything except hope. Ashcroft stepped back with disgust and calmly wiped the toe of his boot with a monogrammed silk cloth, white, embroidered with a crown and crimson thread. "You signed the law," he said. "You understood the terms." He looked down at Elias as if he were nothing but wet rope. "The girl will be sent to London," he added. "She will be trained as a companion to proper families. That is a privilege, not a punishment, for a creature born on a forgotten island." Behind them, the men in blue didn't flinch. Their sabers remained at their sides, their eyes never blinked. But Isadora cried. She stood in the doorway, shaking, her doll hanging limp in her arms, rain streaking down her cheeks like ink on old paper. Elias turned to her, and something shattered inside him. Not a bone, not a thought, a dam built from guilt, silence, and promises made on dying lips. He saw his wife again, not in the rain, but in his mind. That last night, the fire, her voice rasping through smoke. Don't let them near her. He had failed. He had betrayed the one thing that mattered, and it wasn't debt that gripped his chest now. It was treason, against his own blood. Elias rose, slow as a storm pulling from the deep. His knees cracked, his fists clenched. He stared at Ashcroft with eyes that no longer begged, only burned. And in that moment, through the veil of rain and despair, he remembered a name buried like a secret beneath waves and time. A name whispered when the wind turned cold, a name feared even by devils in red coats. Blackbeard. Ashcroft noticed the change in him. His smile thinned. "You would challenge the crown now, old man?" Elias didn't answer, not with words, but deep inside, something had turned. Something ancient, something hungry. He wasn't just a father anymore. He was a fuse, and something was about to burn. The mangroves dripped with heat and silence, roots twisted like the bones of drowned men, and the air was thick, not just with rot and salt, but with warnings. Birds refused to sing here, even the wind tiptoed. Elias rode alone. His horse was a bag of ribs and wheezing breath, hooves slipping on the muddy trails as dawn smeared blood orange across the sky. Behind him, Isadora slept in the dark of a cellar, hidden in the one place Ashcroft's men wouldn't search. Not yet. He had no coin, no army, only a name. A name most sailors only dared to speak in whispers. Blackbeard. Some called him a demon, others a saint with a sword. But every man who touched debt and lived long enough to regret it agreed on one thing. If the sea couldn't save you, he might, if he wanted to. Elias passed still waters where sharks floated like ghosts beneath the surface. He crossed estuaries where trees leaned close as if listening. Rain poured, warm and cruel, soaking his boots and whispering doubt in his ear. Still, he pressed on. He had nothing left except a broken promise and a name that tasted like fire. On his tongue. They found him before he found them. Two shadows slid from the undergrowth without a sound, muskets in hand, boots wrapped in wet cloth, faces painted with ash and oil. Pirates, but not like the ones who shouted in taverns and died in chains. These were wraiths in human skin, men of his crew. "Who sent you?" one asked, voice flat. Elias dismounted, legs shaking. "I need to see him." The second man studied him. "Most men who say that don't live long enough to regret it." "I'm not most men," Elias said. "Then what are you?" He looked up, rain dripping from his brow. "I'm a father." They blindfolded him and tied his hands, not cruelly, but with care. Then they led him through a maze of water and roots, their steps sure, their silence louder than thunder. Hours passed, or minutes. He couldn't tell. Finally, the cloth came off. He stood in a clearing of bone-white sand, surrounded by black sails and broken masts. Wreckage turned into shelter. Firelight flickered in barrels. And in the center sat a chair carved from driftwood and whale ribs. And in that chair, he waited. Blackbeard. Not a ghost, not a story. A man, but barely. His beard hung in heavy coils, braided with fragments of silver and teeth that didn't belong to him. His eyes glowed with something not quite human, like lanterns lit inside a storm. His coat was torn at the edges, burned in places, but the weight of it bent the air around him. He raised a hand, and the rain seemed to pause. Elias stepped forward. "I have nothing left to give," he said. Blackbeard's voice rumbled like thunder over calm water. "Then why are you here?" "For her," Elias whispered. "For my daughter." The old pirate leaned forward. "And what would you offer? To buy back what the sea already took?" Elias didn't hesitate. "My life, my name, my soul, if that's what it takes." Blackbeard smiled, not kindly. "You think that's a fair trade?" And Elias, soaked, shaking, broken beyond repair, whispered, "No, but it's all I have." Blackbeard's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the storm gathered its teeth. "Good," he said, "because I don't make fair trades." The candle burned black. Its flame didn't dance. It stood still, as if afraid to move. The air inside the ruined ship creaked with each breath, heavy with salt, soot, and something older than fear. Edward Teach sat in silence, hunched over a length of whalebone, his blade carving slow, deliberate lines into the white, like a priest etching sin into scripture. His beard was woven in thick coils, and tucked between them flickered bits of flame. Real fire. The scent of old gunpowder clung to him like a second skin. He didn't look up. Not at first. Then his voice cracked the stillness like a cannon through fog. "What do you want, old whaler?" Elias stood on the wet boards, arms stiff at his sides, eyes locked on the candle that refused to flicker. He didn't shake. He didn't bow. He spoke. Of the gold, of the contract, of the Latin clause that bled through the parchment like poison. He spoke of Ashcroft, of the men in blue, of Isadora's braids trembling in the rain, of begging in the mud, of boots that tasted of blood and silk, of the voice of his wife, dead but not gone, whispering warnings too late to be heard. He told it straight, like a harpoon to the chest. When he finished, the cabin held its breath. Blackbeard finally raised his eyes. He stared not at Elias's face, but into him, as if reading each regret carved into the marrow of the man. There was no pity in that gaze, only recognition, the look a doomed man gives another who still thinks he can be saved. Then came the question, low, sharp, like the cut of a slow knife. "You believe justice exists at sea?" Elias didn't blink. "No." Blackbeard tilted his head. "Then what do you believe in?" Elias stepped closer. Rainwater dripped from his cuffs. His hands were raw, his boots split open, but his voice came steady, cut from something deeper than hope. "I believe in punishment." A silence fell heavier than thunder. Then, for the first time, Blackbeard smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, but like a man who had waited years to hear someone finally speak the truth. He set the whalebone down. The carving was a face, hollow-eyed, mouth screaming, crown cracked in two. "Then let's make them pay." The black flame rose, and the sea, somewhere beyond the wrecked timbers, began to move. The sea howled like it remembered every broken oath. That same night, the Queen, En's revenge, set sail, silent at first, like a shadow stretching over the tide. No drums, no cheers, just the creak of cursed wood and the crackle of flame-fed ropes. The men didn't speak. They didn't need to. Blackbeard had already given the order, and Elias was at his side, eyes hollow, hands steady, heart burning. Blackbeard never asked another question. He knew some pacts aren't sealed with gold. They're written in pain. They moved through the dark like a storm, painted onto the horizon. A black smear bleeding toward the coast, and Saint-Michel waited. At dawn, the town stirred to the distant groan of the tide, unaware that history had already turned. Then the fog parted, and the Queen Anne's revenge arrived. It didn't sail into the bay. It took it. The ship didn't fly, it didn't float. It loomed, sails torn like wings of a beast too old to die, figurehead snarling through the mist. Its cannons were open mouths. Its anchor was already dripping with blood. Ashcroft's men saw it, unversed, and ran. Officers threw muskets into the sand. Some dove into the water before a single shot was fired. They had heard the stories. They knew what that flag meant. But Ashcroft stood on the balcony of his great house, clutching the railing with white knuckles. He watched, frozen, as his empire, built on contracts, lies, and borrowed crowns, began to crumble. Smoke rose before the first cannon struck. The Revenge didn't ask for surrender. It screamed. Flames tore through the harbor fort like it was made of dried leaves. The governor's banners caught fire in mid-air. Powder barrels turned to thunder in the streets. And in the center of it all stood Elias Marlowe, soaked in salt and vengeance, firing the first cannon himself. He didn't shout. He didn't smile. He simply whispered, "This is what the sea remembers." From the deck above, Blackbeard watched, arms crossed, beard glowing with sparks. He didn't need to lead. He was the storm. And for the first time, Ashcroft felt fear that could not be written out of a contract, because what stood before him was not a pirate. It was the reckoning he never believed would come. The dock was scorched and slick with ash. Smoke coiled through the broken masts, and embers floated like ghosts looking for a home. The sea hissed beneath them, waves licking the stone like it could taste justice. There, between the shattered crates and cannon-split beams, Blackbeard waited, boots planted, coat heavy with seawater and powder. His pistol already drawn, barrel warm, Ashcroft stepped onto the wharf with the stiffness of a man still pretending the world hadn't changed. His medals were dull now, his face pale beneath the weight of burned pride, but his grip tightened around the polished pistol at his side. Then came the words, low and final. "This isn't London," Blackbeard said. His voice was calm, almost cold. "Out here, children are not property." Ashcroft pulled the trigger, but he was too slow. Blackbeard's shot sang before the general's pistol even cleared the holster. The bullet tore past Ashcroft's face, ripping through the crest pinned to his chest. The symbol of the crown, now shattered like every lie it stood for. Ashcroft staggered, hand trembling, mouth open. Blackbeard didn't move again. He just turned his head. "Elias," he growled, "finish what you started." Elias stepped from the shadows. Reins still clung to his hair, and his shoulders shook, not from fear, but from the weight of everything he carried. His wife's last words, Isadora's tears, the silence of 6 moons without wind. In his hands he held no blade, only a rope. He walked to Ashcroft, each step a break in the chain that had bound him for too long. The general raised his chin, waiting for death, maybe even expecting it, but it didn't come. Elias knelt, bound his wrists, tight, firm, silent. Then he began to strip him, button by button, medal by medal, the fine coat, the blood-stained sash, the polished boots, until Ashcroft knelt in the dirt, soaked, shivering, no longer a general, just a man, just another name the sea would forget. The people of Saint-Michel watched from shattered windows and ruined balconies. Fishermen, mothers, children. For years they had feared this man. Now they saw him for what he was. Elias spoke only once. Let him live now, among the ones he called lesser. Blackbeard said nothing, but a flame danced quietly in his beard, the color of honor reborn in ash. And behind them, the tide began to rise. The smoke had cleared. The cannons had gone silent. Only the sea remained, breathing slow and steady, like it had waited centuries for this moment to pass. Elias stood at the edge of the pier, the salt wind brushing against his face. Behind him, the wreckage of power still smoldered. Ahead, the Queen Anne's Revenge drifted gently, its black sails half-folded, like the wings of a beast finally at rest. Blackbeard approached without sound. His boots left no mark on the scorched wood. He looked at Elias not as a captain, but as a brother who had tasted the same poison, grief, loss, and vengeance. He held out a heavy hand. "There's a place for you among us," he said. "On the sea she'll be protected, and so will justice." Elias turned to look at Isadora. She was curled inside a pile of old fishing nets, asleep under a patched sailcloth. Her breath was slow. Her doll rested on her chest. For the first time in years, her face was at peace. Elias smiled. But there was sorrow in it, the kind that only fathers carry. "I've already lost too much of the sea," he said. "I want her to grow up with her feet on dry land." Blackbeard said nothing at first. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small piece of parchment sealed in red wax, marked with a symbol no man dared forge. He pressed it into Elias's palm. "If the sea ever takes too much again," Blackbeard said. "Throw this into the water, and I'll come." Elias looked down at the seal. It was warm, heavy, alive. He nodded once. Blackbeard turned and walked back to the boat. No grand words, no salute, just silence, the kind that comes after something sacred has been said. The Queen Anne's revenge vanished with the morning mist, leaving only the scent of powder, salt, and promises kept. And Elias, he lifted Isadora into his arms, the paper still clutched in his hand. He would never be the same, but now he had something worth staying for. Far beyond the reach of Saint-Michel's broken docks, a black shape still flickered on the horizon, a ship too stubborn to sink, too cursed to rest. The flames didn't rise from its hull anymore, but from memory, from everything the tide refused to bury. They say Ashcroft was last seen limping through the fishing villages he once ruled with an iron fist, now muttering half-sentences to no one, clutching a rusted medal to his chest. The man who once wore gold now begged for salt and bread, his voice thinner than smoke, his name spit out like spoiled rum. But the story didn't end with him. It never did. Elias rebuilt his home plank by plank, brick by brick. The same hands that once begged for mercy now held hammers steady. The same arms that once clung to despair now held his daughter each night, as if the wind might still come to steal her, but he never slept fully again. Something inside him had been left behind, not in the fire, not in the debt, but in that moment when he bound Ashcroft's wrists instead of ending him. Mercy had a price too. Each full moon, Elias climbed to the cliffs, the place where sea and sky spoke in silence. He stood alone, the night wind slicing across his skin like old guilt, staring out where the ocean swallowed the light, waiting, not for danger, not for peace, but for something that had never stopped watching him. Some nights he swore he saw it, not a shadow, not a dream, but the Queen Anne's revenge, rising from the mist like it remembered what justice smelled like. Its sails, torn but tall, its lanterns, still burning with flame that knew no air, its figurehead, snarling, hungry, alive. And sometimes, just for a breath, he saw him. Blackbeard, standing at the rail, coat whipping in the wind, eyes locked on the cliffs, silent, eternal, not calling him back, just reminding him that some debts don't fade with time, that some promises, once broken, anchor themselves to the soul, that some names, like his wife's, like his own, belong now to the sea. He said the sea forgets, Elias once whispered, voice trembling beneath the stars, but he was wrong. It remembers who we were and what we did. And maybe that's why he kept the letter sealed in wax, buried beneath the hearthstone. Blackbeard's seal, heavy, unopened, still waiting. Because Elias knew the day might come when something else is taken. And when it does, the ocean will hear his call again. Fishermen still speak of it. The black ship that appears when a blood promise hasn't been paid. Not for gold, not for revenge, but for something older. A reckoning. And those who've seen it say the air turns thick when it nears, like breathing through memory, like guilt made wind. And if you listen closely, above the waves and creaking wood, you'll hear a single voice, Blackbeard's. You can't outlive the sea. You can only choose who you become before it takes you. Did you already know this forgotten part of the story? And if it had been your child, what would you have done? What other stories still sleep beneath the tides, waiting to be told? If this story touched you in any way, don't let it vanish like so many other names the sea has taken. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep hearing what was never meant to be forgotten. Some books close with peace, others, like this one, close with a whisper of sails and a shadow that never truly leaves.